For a lot of folks, it is common sense, but to those on the Ninth Circuit, which has been known as the Nutty Ninth, you heard Karl Rove just talking about its reputation for kind of going the liberal way of things. The Nutty Ninth, as it's commonly referred to, it doesn't always necessarily follow common sense. You know why? It's the most reversed court on the circuit. Back in 2011, it was admonished by the Supreme Court for exhibiting judicial disregard for sound and established principles of law. Yikes. Joining me right now is Jordan Sekulow from the American Center for Law and Justice. Good to have you here. That's Thanks, not Trish. A great thing to be cited for when you happen to be a court of law. Tell us more about the Ninth Circuit.
Well, the Ninth Circuit, represents a very liberal part of the country for the most part, especially the big states there, like California, like Washington State, like Oregon and Hawaii. It's a large circuit, but as you said, it's results-oriented instead of law-oriented, and that's what the Supreme Court admonished it for. It's that idea of the living Constitution, so the judges are kind of known for the most part of how do we get to the result we want with the facts and the law in front of us, instead of saying, let's just analyze, is this constitutional, is what was done here legal, whether we like it or not. And that's really the role of the courts. I mean, most circuit courts are the courts of last resort. Now, when you get to a issue of a president's executive order, Trish, obviously this is on a much faster pace to the United States Supreme Court, even on the issue of the temporary restraining order. And we're only looking at the restraining order, and this district judge, there was like no legal analysis whatsoever on how they would be suffering irreparable injury in the state of Washington.
He mentioned sort of,
for not
the
allowing
economic
people that are not from America into our country.
Which, by the way, I would just say, look, there are economic consequences for sure to a terrorist attack. Don't tell me there weren't consequences to 9/11, obviously significantly from a personal level, but economic as well. So I don't get that argument. I also don't get the argument that it hasn't happened before. So, you can't cite this, because to me, that's part of the problem with government. Overall, they're reactive as opposed to being preemptive in something like this. We should be out in front when it comes to terror, Jordan.
Yeah, and Trish, the law is very clear. It gives the president this power. That's what's pretty unfortunate that this is in the Ninth Circuit, honestly, because the Immigration Nationality Act says the president, whenever it feels like a group of people, so an actual class, is going to be detrimental to our country's security, you can ban them from entering the country.
And that's the 1952 law that you're citing, just so our viewer knows, that gives the president this power. Now, in conflict is the 1965 Act, which basically says you can't discriminate against religion. He would make the point, and his lawyers will make this point, it's not a religious discriminatory ban, because if it were, then you'd be saying, hey, it's all Muslims altogether, not just these 7 countries. Very quickly, let me just ask you about the significance of the fact that we are increasingly seeing judges that are trying to remake the world as they see fit, as opposed to just upholding the law. What has happened to the legal system, and does academia have a role in it at all, Jordan?
Yeah, it's the law schools. I mean, in law schools, you're not learning the actual Constitution. You're learning precedent. You're learning Supreme Court cases. And, of course, some of that's important, but you're learning what judges believe and what justices believe about the Constitution instead of going to the text. That's why Supreme Court nominees are important, but so are circuit court nominees and district court nominees from the top to the bottom. And right now we're seeing the effects of judicial activism. Listen, you cannot like this policy. This is obviously going to be litigated. An executive order like this is going to go to court, Trish, but you didn't have to issue a temporary restraining order on the way up. You could have let it, let the executive order stand and then have the case on the merits.
It shows just what a chaotic state we're in some ways, something that I imagine many on the left kind of love and are eating up right now. Anyway, Jordan, it is good to see you. Good to have your perspective.